The colour wheel exercise is one that you could do with any 3 primary colours that you have. In fact, you could do it with any colours that you have. But a much more efficient way of doing it is to use a grid. So you have a square for each of the colours that you have, and I'm going to label them so that I don't forget which is which. So I have cadmium red here, quinacridone rose, phthalo blue, ultramarine, cad yellow, and lemon yellow. And then I do the same down the side. You don't have to write it out in full, as long as you know what you mean. Then where the 2 colours meet, you mix them together so that you have a reference of the colour that is achieved by combining the 2 starter colours. So first of all, let's just put in where they meet and are the same. So lemon plus lemon gives lemon. Here's my cadmium and cadmium. So on the diagonal will be all of the pure colours that you start with. This is my ultramarine. My phthalo. Rose. And cadmium red. Doesn't have to be very neat. And now where the 2 colours meet together, you mix them together. So here on the first one across here I have a cadmium red mixed with a quinacridone rose. So I'm going to do that on the palette. And that gives me a rather intermediate kind of red. And obviously, as I said before, it depends upon the proportion of each. So you're trying to go for an equal balance between the 2 colours. Next I have cadmium red and phthalo. And this gives me quite a brown. And cadmium red and ultramarine. And that's a slightly redder brown than the phthalo, and that's because the phthalo has more yellow in it. Cadmium yellow and cadmium red we've already mixed because we used that in the examples, and that makes a very nice orange. And you can go across like this. Also, while you're doing this, you can put it in the other mixture as well. So we've got cadmium red and cadmium yellow here, so I'm using the same colour. So it's up to you whether you fill the complete box or just as you go along, and watching out for colours bleeding into a colour next to it. You can do this with both acrylics and watercolour, and it's quite good exercise to do just to have a reference of all of the colours that you have. So I started with my double primary palette, but I can easily add in some additional colours. So here I have 3 more. I have a yellow ochre, a cerulean blue, otherwise known as sky blue, and a vermilion. And I'm going to put a little bit of each on the palette. That's the cerulean. The vermilion, which is a very orangey red, a little bit like the cadmium. And yellow ochre, which is quite a tan brownish yellow. Just adding these in. So here's another combination that in theory could give me a purple if I think about red and blue, and the cadmium red and the cerulean blue. But we'll see what happens when I mix these together. Gives me really quite a neutral brown, and that's because there's a lot of yellow in the cerulean. So again, it's like mixing the 3 primaries together to get brown. Interestingly though, if I keep adding the cerulean to the red, it gives me a rather nice neutral grey colour. And this is what happens when the 3 colours cancel each other out. Slightly bluish grey, but that can be very useful colour for using for shading in paintings where you're not going to use black. And we're going to talk a little bit more about neutral colours and complementary colours a little bit later on. Now going to mix the yellow ochre with the cerulean. And that gives me quite a nice green. So you would continue like that and completely fill up the boxes, and once you've finished you have a fantastic record of the colours that you can mix. But it also shows you where there might be some gaps, so if you have not achieved a really clean purple, for example, this might be a clue that you need a different red or a different blue in your tub of paints.